In a crowded courtroom, a homeless woman stood shackled and silent, accused of stealing a jacket to survive the cold. The prosecutor called her a vagrant. The judge barely looked up. No one in that room knew who she really was. But when the clerk read her full name aloud, everything stopped. The judge went pale. He stood up from the bench, something judges almost never do, and the entire courtroom held its breath. What happened next changed everything. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. Because what this woman had sacrificed and what the system had taken from her was about to be revealed in the most powerful way imaginable. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and old concrete. Ren Hallstad sat with her back pressed against the cold wall, knees drawn up, hands resting loosely on her shins. The fluorescent light above flickered every few seconds, casting uneven shadows across the small space. She had been here for 3 days now, 3 days of the same routine, 3 days of silence. In the cell next to hers, a younger woman with bleached hair and smudged eyeliner had been trying to start a conversation since yesterday afternoon. She asked where Ren was from. She asked if Ren had ever been arrested before. She asked if Ren was scared. Ren never answered. She just sat there, breathing slowly, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance. The woman eventually gave up, muttering something about people who thought they were too good to talk. Ren's hair hung in dark tangles around her face. Her clothes were torn in places, stained with dirt and something that might have been motor oil. Her hands were calloused, the knuckles bruised. On her left forearm, barely visible beneath the grime, were faint scars that ran in precise parallel lines. They looked old. They looked deliberate. Deputy Rustin appeared at the bars just after 7 in the morning. He was a broad man in his 40s with thinning hair and a permanent scowl. He carried a plastic tray with a carton of milk, a wrapped sandwich, and an apple that had seen better days. He unlocked the slot at the bottom of the cell door and shoved the tray through without ceremony. It skidded across the concrete and stopped a few inches from Ren's feet. "Eat up, sweetheart," he said. "Judge Oakridge doesn't like delays. You're up in an hour." Ren reached for the tray and pulled it closer. She unwrapped the sandwich, examined it briefly, then ate in small, methodical bites. She chewed exactly 15 times before swallowing. She drank half the milk, left the apple untouched. When she was done, she set the tray aside and closed her eyes. Her lips began to move, barely perceptible, forming silent words. Her fingers tapped against her thigh in a steady rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deputy Rustin watched her for a moment, frowning. Then he shook his head and walked away, his boots echoing down the corridor. The courtroom was small, built sometime in the 70s and not updated much since. Wood paneling lined the walls. The benches in the gallery were worn smooth from decades of use. The air smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper. It was a Thursday morning and the docket was light. A handful of people sat scattered across the benches, retirees looking for something to do, a couple of college students fulfilling a civic observation requirement, a local reporter typing quietly on a laptop. Judge Emmett Oakridge sat at the bench, reviewing a stack of files. He was 63 years old, with a lined face and gray hair that he kept trimmed short. He had been on the bench for 20 years. He was known as fair, but tired, the kind of judge who had seen too many cases blur together into one long parade of human failure. He glanced at the clock on the wall, then nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in the next defendant," he said. The side door opened, and Deputy Rustin led Ren into the courtroom. She was shackled at the wrists and ankles, the chains clinking softly with each step. She wore an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too large, the sleeves hanging past her hands. Her hair still fell across her face, obscuring most of her features. She kept her eyes on the floor as she shuffled to the defense table. The gallery murmured. A woman in the second row leaned over to whisper something to the man beside her. Another person pulled out their phone, then thought better of it and put it away. Deputy Rustin positioned Ren in front of the table and stepped back, arms crossed. At the defense table stood Nash Delcourt, a public defender in his mid-20s who looked like he had slept in his suit. His tie was crooked, his hair stuck up in the back. He had a stack of files under one arm and a coffee-stained legal pad in his hand. He glanced at Ren, then at the judge, then back at Ren. He had only met his client once, the day before, and she had not said a single word to him. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Felicia Garnett stood ready. She was in her early 40s, sharp-featured, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She had prosecuted hundreds of cases like this one, low-level offenses, repeat offenders, people who cycled through the system again and again. She barely glanced at Wren as she opened her file. Judge Oakridge looked up from his papers. He adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat. "Case number 4721, he said. The State versus Wren Hallstad. Charges are trespassing, petty theft, and resisting a lawful order. Counselor, is your client ready to proceed?" Nash straightened, fumbling with his legal pad. "Yes, Your Honor, we're ready." The judge turned his attention to Wren. "Ms. Hallstad, you have the right to an attorney. Mr. Delcourt has been appointed to represent you. Do you understand?" Wren did not respond. She stood perfectly still, head down, hands folded in front of her. The chains hung between her wrists like a tether. Judge Oakridge frowned. "Ms. Hallstad, I need you to acknowledge that you understand." Silence. Nash leaned over and whispered urgently to Wren. His voice was low, pleading. She barely moved her head, just the slightest shake. Nash straightened again, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, my client has been unresponsive since intake. I've attempted to communicate with her multiple times, but she has not spoken." The judge sighed and set down his pen. "Ms. Hallstad, you need to participate in your own defense. If you refuse to cooperate, this process becomes much more difficult for everyone involved." Still nothing. Wren's breathing was slow and even. Her posture did not change. In the gallery, someone muttered loud enough to be heard, probably on something. Another voice, softer. "They never want help, do they?" Judge Oakridge shot a warning glance at the gallery, then turned back to the prosecutor. "Ms. Garnett, please present the state's case." Felicia Garnett stepped forward, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She held a slim folder in one hand and a remote control in the other. A screen descended from the ceiling behind the judge's bench. "Your Honor, the facts of this case are straightforward," she began. On the evening of November 19th, security personnel at Riverside Plaza discovered the defendant sleeping in the parking structure. She had created a makeshift shelter in one of the stairwells using cardboard and plastic sheeting. When approached by security, she refused to leave. The screen lit up with a grainy security camera image. It showed a figure curled up in a corner of a concrete stairwell, surrounded by bags and bundled fabric. The timestamp in the corner read 22:47. Garnett continued. Upon further investigation, security found that the defendant had taken a jacket from an unlocked vehicle on the third level of the structure. The jacket was recovered and returned to its owner. The defendant was arrested without incident. The next image appeared. A close-up of Wren sitting on the ground, arms wrapped around her knees, face hidden. A security guard stood a few feet away, speaking into a radio. "The defendant has no identification," Garnett said. "No fixed address, no verifiable employment history for the past 4 years. She has been picked up twice before in the past 6 months for similar offenses, loitering, trespassing. She is, by every measure, a vagrant who refuses to engage with available social services." Nash stood up, a bit too quickly. "Your Honor, if I may, my client has experienced significant housing instability. She is not a danger to anyone. The jacket in question was taken for warmth, not profit. This is a survival issue, not a criminal enterprise." Garnett turned to him with a thin smile. "Counselor, there are shelters. There are programs. Your client has chosen not to avail herself of them. That's not instability. That's a choice to burden the community." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gallery. Judge Oakridge raised a hand for silence. "Ms. Garnett, let's keep the editorial commentary to a minimum. Stick to the facts." "Of course, Your Honor." Garnett turned back to the screen. "The state recommends psychiatric evaluation and a suspended sentence contingent on the defendant seeking appropriate services. We believe this is both fair and necessary." Judge Oakridge looked at Nash. "Counselor, does your client wish to enter a plea?" Nash glanced at Wren. She had not moved. He hesitated, then spoke. "Your Honor, given my client's current state, I would ask the court for a continuance to allow me more time to consult with her and determine the best course of action." The judge considered this. He tapped his fingers on the bench, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then he looked directly at Wren. Ms. Hallstad, this is your opportunity to speak. If there is anything you want to say, anything at all, now would be the time. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Wren lifted her head, just slightly. Her eyes remained downcast, but the angle of her jaw shifted. Something passed across her face. Not defiance, not fear. Something deeper. Exhaustion, maybe, or resignation. Judge Oakridge leaned forward. He studied her for a long moment. There was something in her posture that gave him pause. The way she held herself, even in chains, even in a jumpsuit 3 sizes too large. It was not the posture of someone broken. It was the posture of someone choosing silence. Ms. Hallstad, he said again, more gently this time. I can't help you if you won't help yourself. Wren's eyes flicked up, just for a second. They met the judge's gaze. They were dark, hollow, but sharp, intensely sharp, like the eyes of someone who saw everything and said nothing. Then she looked away again. The moment passed. Judge Oakridge sat back. He glanced at the prosecutor, then at Nash. Before I make a ruling, let's make sure we have everything on record. Mrs. Fentress, please confirm the defendant's full legal name for the record. At the clerk's desk, Mrs. Yael Fentress had been sitting quietly, reviewing the intake paperwork. She was a meticulous woman in her 50s, known for catching errors that others missed. She wore reading glasses on a chain and kept her desk organized to the point of obsession. She had been a court clerk for 30 years. She prided herself on getting the details right. She picked up the intake form and scanned it. Then she paused. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. She read the form again, slower this time. Her hand, holding the paper, began to tremble slightly. Mrs. Fentress, the judge prompted, the full name, please. She did not respond immediately. She set the paper down, then picked it up again. Her lips moved as she read silently. Her face went pale. Mrs. Fentress? Judge Oakridge's tone sharpened. Is there a problem? She looked up, startled. Your Honor, I apologize. I just noticed that the full legal name has not been read into the official record. The judge frowned. We've established her identity. The intake form lists her as Wren Hallstad. Yes, Your Honor, but the full name. The complete name. It should be entered formally. Judge Oakridge waved a hand, irritated. Very well. Go ahead. Mrs. Fentress stood. She lifted the paper with both hands. The courtroom had gone quiet. Even the reporter in the back row had stopped typing. There was something in Mrs. Fentress's voice, a tremor that made people pay attention. She cleared her throat. The defendant's full legal name is Wren Ashbridge Hallstad. Service number November 7-3 Whiskey 4. 1 Hotel. The courtroom froze. Judge Oakridge's pen, which had been poised above his notepad, stopped mid-stroke. He looked up sharply. Service number? Mrs. Fentress's voice was barely above a whisper now. Military designation. SEAL Team 6. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Judge Oakridge stared at Mrs. Fentress. Then he looked at Wren. His face had gone pale. He set his pen down carefully, as if afraid it might break. Repeat that, he said. Mrs. Fentress swallowed hard. Wren Ashbridge Hallstad, SEAL Team 6. The file indicates she was listed as killed in action. March 2021. The gallery erupted. Whispers turned into shocked murmurs. Someone gasped. Deputy Rustin, who had been leaning against the wall, straightened abruptly. Nash turned to stare at Wren, his mouth open. Garnett stood frozen, the color draining from her face. Your Honor, this has to be a mistake. There's no way. Judge Oakridge held up a hand. His hand was shaking. Silence. Everyone be quiet. The courtroom obeyed instantly. The judge stood. It was a slow, deliberate movement. Judges rarely stood during proceedings. It was a breach of protocol, a signal that something monumental had just occurred. He gripped the edge of the bench as if to steady himself. He stared at Wren. She had closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek, cutting a clean line through the dirt on her face. She did not wipe it away. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally become too much. Judge Oakridge's voice was hoarse. Everyone out. Clear this courtroom, now. Confusion rippled through the gallery. "Your Honor, what?" I said. "Clear the room. This is not a request." Deputy Rustin moved immediately, ushering people toward the doors. The reporter tried to protest. The college students looked around, bewildered, but within minutes the gallery was empty. Only the judge, Wren, Nash, Mrs. Fentress, Garnett, and Deputy Rustin remained. The silence was suffocating. Judge Oakridge stepped down from the bench. It was unprecedented. He walked slowly toward Wren, his hands visible, his movements careful. He stopped 3 feet away from her. "Lieutenant Commander Hallstad," he said quietly. Wren opened her eyes. Her voice, when it finally came, was raw and hoarse from days of disuse. Not anymore. The judge's breath caught. His eyes were wet. He took another step closer. "Fallujah," he said. "Operation Sandglass, November 2019. Wren's eyes snapped to his. For the first time, she was fully present, fully there. The exhaustion was still in her face, but behind it was something else. Recognition. Disbelief. Judge Oakridge's voice broke. "I was Marine Captain Emmett Oakridge, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." Wren stared at him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "We were trapped," the judge continued. 16 of us. Intel said extraction wasn't possible. They told us to hold position and wait for air support that was never coming. We thought we were dead." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Then you showed up. You and your team. Middle of a firefight. Outnumbered 20-1. Wren's face crumpled slightly. She looked away. "You carried my sergeant on your back," the judge said. 2 miles under enemy fire. You took shrapnel in your shoulder, refused medevac until everyone else was out." Wren's voice was barely audible. "Sergeant Pruitt. He had a daughter, Emma. She was 3. Judge Oakridge's tears spilled over. "She's 14 now, plays soccer, wants to be a veterinarian. Because of you." The room was silent except for the sound of the judge's breathing. Nash finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I don't understand. If she's a decorated SEAL, how does she end up homeless? How does someone go from that to this?" Judge Oakridge turned to him, his expression hard. "Because we failed her. All of us." He looked back at Wren. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened?" Wren was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, flat, like she was reading from a mission report. "Syria, Black Op, March 2021. My team was extracting a high-value asset. We were compromised. Enemy knew we were coming." She paused, took a breath. "Team got out. I stayed behind to set charges. Buy time for the helicopter." "What happened?" the judge asked gently. "Detonator malfunctioned. Blast went off early. Next thing I remember, I woke up in a field hospital. No gear, no ID, no records. Local forces brought me in. No one knew who I was." Mrs. Fentress was typing frantically on her computer. "Your Honor, I'm pulling up DOD records. It lists her as KIA, killed in action, official." Wren nodded, made sense. "Mission was classified, cleaner that way." "But you survived," Nash said. "Took me 4 months to get back to the States, medical transports, refugee channels. When I finally got to the VA, I told them who I was." "What did they say?" Judge Oakridge asked, though he already knew the answer. Wren's smile was bitter. "They said I was lying, trying to steal valor." The room went still. "My face was different," Wren continued. "Burns, reconstructive surgery. I didn't look like my service photo anymore. Navy said my files were classified, even from me, couldn't confirm or deny." She looked down at her shackled hands. "I tried for 6 months. Every office, every department. No one believed me." Garnett, who had been standing frozen, spoke in a shaking voice. "Your Honor, if this is true, the charges—" Judge Oakridge cut her off. "The charges are meaningless." He looked at Deputy Rustin. "Remove her restraints. Immediately." Rustin moved forward, his hands trembling as he unlocked the shackles. They fell to the floor with a metallic clang. Wren rubbed her wrists slowly, staring at the red marks left behind. Judge Oakridge took a deep breath. "We're reconvening." Full courtroom. Nash started to speak. "Your Honor, maybe we should handle this quietly." The judge's voice was firm. "No. This happened in public. It gets fixed in public." He turned to Wren. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to trust me one more time." Wren looked at him, exhausted. Why? Because you trusted me in Fallujah, and I owe you my life. The doors to the courtroom opened. The gallery filed back in, buzzing with confusion and speculation. Word had spread. More people had arrived. Local news crews were visible outside, cameras rolling. Deputy Rustin kept them at bay, but only just. Wren stood at the defense table, unshackled now, still in the oversized orange jumpsuit. Nash stood beside her, still processing everything. Garnett sat at the prosecution table, pale and silent. Judge Oakridge returned to the bench. He raised his gavel and brought it down 3 times. Sharp. Deliberate. This court is back in session. Before we proceed, I have a statement to make. The room went silent instantly. A grave injustice has occurred within these walls. The woman standing before you is Lieutenant Commander Wren Ashbridge Halstad, United States Navy SEALs. Gasps erupted. Someone in the back row stood up. A veteran, gray-haired, eyes wide. She is a decorated combat veteran, the judge continued. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. She has served this country with honor in ways most of us cannot imagine. The murmurs grew louder. People were pulling out phones, texting, whispering urgently. She was brought into this courtroom in chains, the judge said, his voice cracking, for stealing a jacket to stay warm. We treated her like she was nothing. We were wrong. He looked directly at Wren. I was wrong. Garnett stood, her voice shaking. Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges, with prejudice. She turned to Wren. Ma'am, I don't have the words. I'm so sorry. Wren's voice was quiet. You were doing your job. That's not good enough, Garnett said, tears streaming down her face. Judge Oakridge removed his robe. He folded it carefully and set it on the bench. Then he walked down the steps. The entire courtroom held its breath. He approached Wren, stopped 3 feet away, came to attention. Spine straight, shoulders back, and then he raised his hand in a crisp military salute. The silence was absolute. Wren stared at him. Then, slowly, she returned the salute. Her hand shook, but her form was perfect. Deputy Rustin snapped to attention. Saluted. The gray-haired veteran in the back row stood and saluted. Then another person stood. Then another. Within moments, half the courtroom was standing, hands over hearts or raised in salute. Wren's tears flowed freely now. She had not lowered her salute. For the first time in years, someone saw her. Really saw her. If this story reminded you of someone who served in silence, someone who gave everything and asked for nothing, share their name in the comments. Let's honor them together. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, please consider subscribing. These moments matter. The courtroom remained frozen in that moment, hands raised, back straight. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muffled noise of the crowd gathering outside. Judge Oakridge held his salute, his arm trembling slightly. Wren's hand did not waver. She stared straight ahead, tears cutting clean lines down her dirt-streaked face. She had not cried in 4 years. Not when she woke up alone in that field hospital. Not when the VA turned her away. Not when she stood at the back of her own funeral. But now, in this small courtroom in Oregon, surrounded by strangers who finally saw her, she wept. Slowly the judge lowered his hand. Wren followed. The others in the gallery began to sit, the sound of shuffling feet and rustling fabric breaking the silence. Judge Oakridge took a step back, his eyes never leaving Wren's face. He cleared his throat, but his voice still came out rough. Commander Halstad, you've served this country with honor. Now it's our turn to serve you. He gestured toward the door. Ma'am, may I escort you out? Wren hesitated. She looked at the crowd, at the faces staring back at her with a mixture of awe and shame. Then she looked back at the judge. After a long pause, she nodded once. Judge Oakridge offered his arm. She took it. They walked together toward the courtroom doors. The gallery parted without a word. People pressed themselves against the benches to make room. Some still had their hands over their hearts. Others wiped their eyes. A young woman in the 3rd row reached out as Wren passed, not to touch her, just to extend her hand in the space between them. A gesture of respect, of apology. Deputy Rustin opened the doors. The noise from outside rushed in. Reporters shouting questions, camera flashes, the click and whir of recording equipment. Judge Oakridge raised his free hand, and the noise died down, though the cameras kept rolling. "This woman has sacrificed more than any of us can imagine," he said, his voice steady now. "She deserves dignity, privacy, and our gratitude. That's all I have to say." He turned to Ren. "I'm making some calls. You're not alone anymore." Ren looked at him. "Thank you." Her voice was so quiet that only he heard it. He nodded, then stepped aside. Nash appeared at her other side, still looking dazed. He had grabbed his coat and draped it over her shoulders, covering the orange jumpsuit. She pulled it, tighter around herself. The cameras followed them as they walked down the courthouse steps. Reporters called out questions, but Ren did not respond. She kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. Nash guided her toward a side exit, where a black sedan was waiting. Mrs. Fentress had made the call. A VA liaison was already on the way, but for now, they needed to get Ren somewhere safe. As they reached the car, a voice called out from the crowd. "Ma'am, wait." Ren stopped. She turned. The gray-haired veteran from the courtroom was pushing his way through the reporters. He was in his 70s, wearing a faded Marine Corps jacket. He stopped a few feet away and came to attention again. He saluted. "Semper Fi, ma'am." Ren returned the salute. Her hand was steadier this time. Semper Fi. The man lowered his hand and stepped back. Ren got into the car. Nash climbed in beside her. The driver pulled away, leaving the courthouse and the cameras behind. Inside the car, Ren leaned her head against the window. The glass was cool against her forehead. She closed her eyes. Nash sat beside her, unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry. I should have looked harder at your file. I should have asked more questions." Ren opened her eyes but did not turn to look at him. "You had 20 cases this week. I saw the stack on your desk. That doesn't make it right." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You did what you could. That's more than most." Nash looked down at his hands. He had been a public defender for 3 years. He had seen people fall through the cracks before. He had watched the system grind people down until there was nothing left. But this was different. This was someone who had given everything, and the system had not just failed her, it had erased her. "Where are we going?" Ren asked. "Temporary housing," Nash said. "The VA is arranging something more permanent, but for now, it's a motel near the base. Clean, quiet, they're covering it." Ren nodded. She did not ask how long. She had learned not to plan beyond the next day. The motel was exactly as Nash had described, clean, quiet. A single-story building with a parking lot that was mostly empty. The room they gave her was small but functional. A bed, a bathroom, a television she would not turn on. Nash helped her check in, then handed her a card with his number on it. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it." Ren took the card. She looked at it for a long moment, then slipped it into the pocket of the jumpsuit. Nash hesitated, then left. The door clicked shut behind him. Ren stood in the middle of the room, still wearing his coat over the orange fabric. She looked around. The walls were beige. The carpet was worn but clean. The bed had white sheets and a thin comforter. It was the first real bed she had seen in 4 years. She sat down on the edge of it. The mattress was soft. Too soft. She was used to concrete, cardboard, the cold ground. She lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling. The silence was overwhelming. No traffic, no voices, no footsteps, just the faint hum of the heater in the corner. She closed her eyes. Sleep did not come. It never did, not easily. Instead, her mind drifted back. Syria, the heat, the dust, the sound of rotors cutting through the air, the weight of her gear, the voices in her earpiece, the mission brief. Extract the asset, get out clean, simple, until it wasn't. She remembered the explosion, not the sound, that came later. First, there was light, bright and all-consuming, then pressure, a force that lifted her off her feet and threw her backward. She remembered hitting the ground, the taste of blood in her mouth, the ringing in her ears that drowned out everything else. She remembered trying to stand, trying to move, but her body would not respond. She remembered the darkness closing in. When she woke up, she was in a bed that smelled like antiseptic. A doctor stood over her, speaking in a language she did not understand. She tried to ask where she was, where her team was, but her throat was raw and the words would not come. The doctor gestured to her face. She reached up and felt bandages. Thick layers of gauze covering the left side of her head. Her fingers traced the edges, trying to understand. The doctor said something else, then left. She was alone. It took weeks before she could speak clearly. Longer before she could walk without help. Her face healed slowly, the burns leaving scars that changed the shape of her features. When they finally brought her a mirror, she did not recognize the person staring back. The left side of her face was a patchwork of skin grafts and scar tissue. Her cheekbone was different. Her jaw sat slightly askew. Her eye, once dark brown, now had a faint cloudiness around the edges from the trauma. She asked about her team. The nurses did not know. She asked about the mission. They looked at her like she was confused. She asked them to contact the Navy. They said they would try, but nothing ever came of it. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. She was transferred twice. First to a larger hospital, then to a refugee processing center. No one seemed to know who she was or how she had ended up there. Her records, if they existed, were not accessible. When she finally made it back to the States, it was through a series of cargo flights and medical transports. She arrived with no identification, no orders, no proof of who she was. She went to the VA. She told them her name, her rank, her service number. They searched their system. Nothing came up. She insisted. They asked for documentation. She had none. They suggested she was mistaken. She told them about her missions, her team, her decorations. They said anyone could memorize those details. They asked her to leave. She tried the Navy. She went to the recruitment office, then to the base. She was turned away at the gate. She called numbers she remembered from years ago. Most were disconnected. The ones that were not led to people who did not remember her or did not believe her. One officer told her that Ren Hallstad was dead, killed in action. There was a file, a death certificate, a funeral. She was talking to a ghost. She went to her family. Her sister Sarah lived 2 hours away. Ren stood outside her house for an hour before she worked up the courage to knock. When Sarah opened the door, she looked at Ren with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" Ren tried to explain. "I'm your sister. It's me." Ren. Sarah's face shifted from confusion to alarm. She stepped back. "I don't know who you are, but my sister is dead. Please leave." The door closed. Ren stood there for a long time. Then she walked away. After that, she stopped trying. It was easier. She had no home, no money, no identity. She slept where she could, shelters at first, but they asked too many questions. Parks, overpasses, parking garages. She learned to move quietly, to avoid attention, to disappear. She was good at it. She had been trained to be invisible. Ren opened her eyes. The ceiling of the motel room came back into focus. She sat up slowly. Her body ached, not from injury, but from years of sleeping on hard surfaces, of carrying everything she owned in a garbage bag, of walking miles every day just to stay warm. She stood and walked to the bathroom. The light flickered on. She looked at herself in the mirror. The scars were still there. The left side of her face still looked like it belonged to someone else. Her hair was tangled and dirty. Her eyes were hollow, but she was still here, still alive, still fighting. She turned on the shower. The water was hot. She stood under it for a long time, letting it wash away the grime, the smell, the weight of the past few days. When she finally stepped out, she wrapped herself in a towel and sat on the edge of the bed. There was a knock at the door. She tensed. Old instincts. She moved to the side of the door, out of the line of sight. "Who is it?" a woman's voice answered. "Commander Hallstad? My name is Dr. Marianne Quillen. I'm with the VA. Judge Oakridge asked me to check in on you." Ren hesitated, then opened the door a crack. A woman in her 50s stood on the other side. She wore a dark blazer and carried a leather satchel. Her expression was calm, professional, but not unkind. "May I come in?" Ren stepped aside. Dr. Quillen entered and set her satchel on the table by the window. She did not sit. She waited for Ren to move first. Ren sat on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in the towel. Dr. Quillen pulled a chair over and sat across from her. "I've reviewed your case," Dr. Quillen said. "What happened to you is unconscionable. I want you to know that we're going to fix this." Ren looked at her. "How?" Dr. Quillen opened her satchel and pulled out a folder. "I've been in contact with the Department of Defense. Your records were classified under a black operations protocol. That's why they were inaccessible. But I've had them unsealed. Your service is verified. Your rank is verified. Your decorations are verified. You are, officially, alive. Ren stared at the folder. She did not reach for it. What does that mean? It means you're entitled to full benefits, medical care, housing assistance, disability compensation, counseling, everything you should have had access to 4 years ago. Ren was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't need compensation. I just want to be left alone. Dr. Quillen leaned forward slightly. Commander, I understand. You've been through hell. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. There are people who want to help, who need to help. Why? Because you earned it, and because it's the right thing to do. Ren looked away. She did not believe in right things anymore. She believed in survival, in making it through one more day. That was all. Dr. Quillen stood. I'm not going to push you, but I'm leaving this folder here. It has contact information for housing coordinators, medical professionals, and a legal advocate who specializes in military cases. When you're ready, call. If you're not ready, that's okay too. But please know that you have options now. She set the folder on the table and walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the handle. One more thing. There's a ceremony at the naval base next week. They want to honor you, publicly. You don't have to go, but the invitation is there. Ren did not respond. Dr. Quillen left, closing the door softly behind her. Ren sat in the silence. She looked at the folder on the table. She did not open it, not yet. Instead, she lay back down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, memories, and questions she did not have answers to. She had spent so long being no one that she did not know how to be someone again. 3 days passed. Ren stayed in the motel room. Dr. Quillen checked in once a day, but she did not push. She brought food, clean clothes, a phone with her number already programmed in. Ren accepted these things, but did not use them. She ate sparingly. She wore the clothes because the jumpsuit was gone, taken by someone she did not see. She looked at the phone, but did not call anyone. On the 4th day, there was another knock. This time, it was Judge Oakridge. Ren opened the door. He stood there in civilian clothes, a jacket and jeans, looking older and more tired than he had in the courtroom. May I come in? He asked. Ren stepped aside. He entered and sat in the chair by the window. Ren sat on the bed, her hands folded in her lap. How are you doing? He asked. I'm here. That's a start. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the judge spoke again. I wanted to tell you something. After the trial, after everything that happened, I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about Fallujah, about that day, about what you did. Ren looked at him but said nothing. I never got to thank you, he continued. Not properly. We were evacuated so fast, and then you disappeared. I tried to find you afterward, but your unit was classified. No one would tell me anything. I thought maybe you were dead. And then I saw you in that courtroom, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it, that someone who saved my life could end up like that. You don't owe me anything, Ren said. Yes, I do. We all do. And I'm going to make sure you get what you deserve. I don't want anything. Judge Oakridge leaned forward. Commander, I know you're tired. I know you've been fighting for so long that you don't think you have any fight left. But you do. And you don't have to fight alone anymore. Ren looked away. She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she could not afford. The judge stood. I'll leave you alone. But I want you to know something. That ceremony Dr. Quillen mentioned, I'll be there. And so will a lot of other people. People who owe you their lives. People who want to see you honored the way you should have been years ago. You don't have to come. But if you do, we'll be there. He walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. Your sister, Sarah. She knows now. Dr. Quillen contacted her, showed her the records. She wants to see you. When you're ready. Ren's breath caught. She did not respond. The judge left. That night, Ren finally opened the folder. Inside were documents, medical records, service records, letters from people she did not know. One letter was from Sergeant Pruitt's wife. It was short. Just a few sentences. Thank you for bringing him home. Thank you for giving us more time. We will never forget you. Ren set the letter down. She picked up the phone Dr. Quillen had left. She stared at it for a long time. Then she dialed a number she had not called in 4 years. It rang 3 times. Then a voice answered. "Hello?" Wren's voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, it's me." There was a long pause, then Sarah's voice shaking. "Wren? Yeah, it's me." Sarah started to cry. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Wren, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you. I thought you were gone. I know. Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm okay. I'm in Oregon. There's a lot to explain. I don't care. Just tell me where you are. I'm coming." Wren gave her the address. They talked for a few more minutes. When they hung up, Wren sat in the silence. For the first time in 4 years, she felt something she had thought was lost forever. Hope. The next morning, Sarah arrived. She pulled into the motel parking lot in a blue sedan, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She got out and stood there, staring at the door to Wren's room. Then she walked over and knocked. Wren opened the door. Sarah looked at her, really looked at her, and her face crumpled. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Wren. Wren stood stiff for a moment, then slowly, carefully, she hugged her sister back. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry. It's okay. No, it's not. But we're going to fix this, together." They spent the day talking. Sarah wanted to know everything. Where Wren had been, what had happened, why she had not come back sooner. Wren told her, not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough. Sarah listened, tears streaming down her face, her hand holding Wren's the entire time. When the sun began to set, Sarah said, "You're coming home with me, tonight, no arguments." Wren hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You don't have to be ready. You just have to come." Wren looked at her sister, at the determination in her eyes, at the love that had never really gone away, just been buried under grief and confusion. She nodded. "Okay." They packed the few things Wren had, the clothes Dr. Quillen had brought, the folder, the phone. They got into Sarah's car and drove. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. Wren watched the landscape pass by, trees, fields, houses with lights in the windows. It felt like another world. Sarah's house was small but warm. She had 2 kids, both in elementary school. They were at their grandmother's for the night, giving Wren time to adjust. Sarah showed her to the guest room. It was simple, a bed, a dresser, a window that looked out onto the backyard. Wren set her things down and sat on the bed. Sarah stood in the doorway. "You're safe here. You know that, right?" Wren nodded. She did not feel safe, not yet. But she wanted to. That night, Wren lay in the bed and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet. She could hear Sarah moving around in the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes being washed. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 4 years, she let herself imagine a future, not a long one, just tomorrow, and maybe the day after that. The ceremony was held the following week. Wren almost did not go. She stood in Sarah's guest room, wearing a borrowed dress, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked different, cleaner. Her hair had been washed and trimmed. The scars were still there, but they did not seem as harsh in the soft light. Sarah stood behind her. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said. "But I think you should." "Why?" "Because people need to see you. They need to know what happened. And maybe you need to see them too." Wren turned away from the mirror. "Okay." They drove to the naval base. The gates were open, and a crowd had already gathered. Veterans, active duty personnel, civilians, reporters. Wren felt her chest tighten. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. "You've got this." They walked through the crowd. People stepped aside, their faces filled with respect and something close to reverence. A podium had been set up near the memorial wall. Judge Oakridge was there, along with Dr. Quillen and several high-ranking officers. When they saw Wren, they stood. The ceremony began. An officer spoke about sacrifice, about service, about the men and women who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. Then Judge Oakridge stepped up to the podium. He spoke about Fallujah, about the 16 Marines who would not be here today if not for Wren Holstad. His voice broke more than once. Finally, he called Wren forward. She walked slowly, her legs feeling like lead. She stood beside him. He turned to her and saluted. She returned it. Then he handed her a folded flag and a framed certificate. Her name was engraved on it. Lieutenant Commander Wren Ashbridge Hallstad, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. The crowd erupted in applause. Wren stood there, holding the flag and the certificate, and for the first time in 4 years, she let herself cry in front of people. If you know a veteran who struggled to come home, share this story. Let them know they're not forgotten. And if you believe these stories matter, consider subscribing. Every voice counts. The applause echoed across the naval base long after it should have faded. Wren stood at the podium, holding the folded flag against her chest, her fingers gripping the fabric so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The certificate with her name engraved on it rested in her other hand, the frame cool and solid. She had not expected this. She had not expected any of this. The crowd before her was a sea of faces, some familiar, most not. Veterans in dress uniforms, active duty personnel standing at attention, civilians with their hands over their hearts, and at the front, Sarah, her sister, crying openly and smiling at the same time. Judge Oakridge stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Wren could hear. "You did it, Commander. You made it back." Wren looked at him. She wanted to say something, but the words would not come, so she nodded. Just once, it was enough. An officer approached, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, pulled back into a tight bun, and enough ribbons on her chest to fill a display case. She saluted Wren, then extended her hand. "Commander Hallstad, I'm Captain Renata Vess. I oversee veteran reintegration programs for this district. We've been waiting a long time to correct this mistake." Wren shook her hand. The captain's grip was firm, respectful. She gestured toward a building behind them, a low structure with clean lines and the Navy insignia above the entrance. "There's someone inside who's been asking to see you, if you're up for it." Wren glanced at Sarah. Her sister gave her an encouraging nod. Wren turned back to the captain. "Who?" Captain Vess smiled. "Someone who's been looking for you for 4 years." The inside of the building was quiet, a stark contrast to the noise outside. The walls were lined with photographs of past ceremonies, faces of men and women who had served, some smiling, some solemn. Wren walked beside the captain, her steps echoing on the polished floor. They stopped in front of a door marked Conference Room B. The captain knocked twice, then opened it. Inside, a man stood by the window, his back to them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair that had gone mostly gray. He wore a Navy uniform, the rank insignia on his shoulder marking him as a Master Chief. When he turned around, Wren's breath stopped. Pruitt, Sergeant Marcus Pruitt, now Master Chief Marcus Pruitt, stared at her. His face was older, lined with years of service and stress, but his eyes were the same, sharp, focused, alive. He took a step forward, then another. Then he stopped, as if unsure whether she was real. "Lieutenant Commander Hallstad," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought you were dead." Wren's throat tightened. "I thought the same about you." Pruitt crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug. It was tight, almost too tight, but Wren did not pull away. She stood there, her arms slowly coming up to return the embrace. When he finally let go, his eyes were wet. "You carried me out of Fallujah. 2 miles. I was unconscious for most of it, but I remember pieces. I remember your voice telling me to hold on. I remember you refusing to leave me behind. You had a daughter," Wren said. "Emma, she was 3. Pruitt smiled, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "She's 14 now, plays soccer, drives me crazy with how stubborn she is, just like her old man." He paused. "Just like you." Wren looked down. She did not know what to say. Pruitt seemed to sense this. He gestured to the table in the center of the room. "Sit, please. We've got a lot to talk about." They sat. Captain Vess excused herself, closing the door softly behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Pruitt leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "When I heard you were listed as KIA, I didn't believe it. I tried to get answers, but everything was classified. Your team was disbanded. The mission was scrubbed from the record. I kept asking, kept digging. But I hit walls everywhere I turned. Then today I got a call from Judge Oakridge. He told me you were alive, that you'd been living on the streets for 4 years. Pruitt's voice hardened. "That's unacceptable. You saved my life. You saved a lot of lives. And the system threw you away like you were nothing." Wren met his gaze. It wasn't personal. It was just how things worked out. "No, It wasn't how things worked out. It was a failure. Our failure. And we're going to fix it. Wren shook her head slightly. I don't need fixing. I just need people to stop looking at me like I'm broken. Pruitt leaned back in his chair. Fair enough. But you're not doing this alone anymore. You've got people in your corner now. Me, the judge, your sister. A whole lot of others who owe you more than they can ever repay. Wren was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What happened after Fallujah? After I got you out? Pruitt exhaled slowly. Medevac got me to a field hospital. They patched me up. Took me 3 months to recover fully. By the time I was back on my feet, you were already gone. Redeployed. I wrote a commendation for you. Submitted it through my chain of command. I don't know if it ever reached you. It didn't, Wren said. Well, it's on record now, along with everything else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. He slid it across the table. It showed a teenage girl in a soccer uniform, grinning at the camera, holding a trophy. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a ponytail, and her eyes were bright with joy. That's Emma. She wanted me to give this to you. She knows what you did. She knows you're the reason I'm still here. Wren picked up the photograph. She stared at it, her thumb tracing the edge of the frame. She's beautiful. She's everything. And she exists because of you. Wren set the photograph down carefully. She looked at Pruitt. Thank you. For not giving up. For remembering. How could I forget? You're the reason I got to see my daughter grow up. You're the reason I'm sitting here today. They talked for another hour. Pruitt told her about his life after Fallujah, his promotion, his transfer to a training command, his struggles with survivor's guilt and PTSD. He told her about the therapy that helped, the people who supported him, the moments when he almost gave up but didn't. Wren listened, saying little but absorbing every word. Pruitt also told her about the other Marines from the day. Lieutenant Hayes had retired and was teaching history at a community college. Corporal Dennison was still stationed overseas. Private First Class Martinez had gotten out and was working as a firefighter in Arizona. All of them remembered her. All of them wanted to thank her. When they finally stood to leave, Pruitt shook her hand again. You've got my number now. Use it. Anytime. Day or night. I mean it. Wren nodded. I will. Before they parted, Pruitt said one more thing. Emma wants to meet you. When you're ready. No pressure. But she's been asking about you since she was old enough to understand what happened that day. Wren felt something shift in her chest. A warmth she had not felt in years. I'd like that. Outside, the crowd had thinned, but there were still people lingering. Some approached Wren to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her they were glad she was alive. One elderly man, a Korean War veteran with a cane, gripped her hand with surprising strength. Welcome home, daughter. You've earned your rest. Others just stood at a distance, watching with quiet respect. A young Marine in dress blues saluted as she passed. Wren returned it automatically, the gesture feeling both foreign and familiar after so long. Sarah was waiting by the car. When she saw Wren, she smiled. You okay? Wren nodded. Yeah, I think I am. They drove back to Sarah's house in comfortable silence. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Wren watched the world pass by outside the window. It felt different now, less hostile, less cold. She was not sure what had changed. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. When they arrived at the house, Sarah's 2 children were waiting on the front porch. Caleb, the 7-year-old, ran up to Wren as soon as she got out of the car. Aunt Wren, did they give you a medal? Can I see it? Wren knelt down to his level. Not a medal. But they gave me this. She showed him the folded flag. Caleb's eyes went wide. That's so cool. Can I touch it? Gently, Wren said. Caleb reached out with both hands, touching the fabric with the kind of reverence only a child could muster. His older sister, Maya, who was 10, stood behind him looking more reserved. Mom said you were a hero, Maya said quietly. Wren looked at her. I was just doing my job. That's what heroes say, Maya replied, with the certainty of someone who had decided this was fact. That night, Wren sat in the guest room at Sarah's house, the folded flag resting on the dresser beside her. She had changed into comfortable clothes, a borrowed sweatshirt and sweatpants, and her hair was still damp from the shower. She picked up the phone Dr. Quillen had given her and scrolled through the contacts. There were numbers for housing coordinators, medical professionals, legal advocates, and a therapist who specialized in working with veterans. She stared at the therapist's number for a long time. Then she pressed call. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. "This is Dr. Leanne Torvin. How can I help you?" Wren hesitated. "My name is Wren Hallstad. Dr. Quillen gave me your number. She said you work with veterans." "I do. It's good to hear from you, Wren. I've been briefed on your case. Would you like to schedule an appointment?" Wren closed her eyes. "Yeah, I think I need to." They set a time for the following week. When Wren hung up, she felt lighter. Not fixed, not whole, but lighter. It was a start. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep did not come easily. It never did. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the silence was not suffocating. It was peaceful. And for the first time in 4 years, Wren allowed herself to imagine what tomorrow might bring. The next morning, Sarah made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. Simple food. But it tasted better than anything Wren had eaten in years. The kids chattered about school and friends and the upcoming soccer game. Wren listened, offering the occasional comment, slowly learning how to be part of a family again. After breakfast, Sarah pulled Wren aside. "I need to show you something." She led Wren to the garage. Inside, stacked neatly against the wall, were boxes labeled with Wren's name. Sarah saw the confusion on Wren's face and explained, "When we had your funeral, when we thought you were gone, I couldn't bring myself to get rid of your things. I packed everything up and kept it. I told myself it was closure, but I think part of me always hoped you'd come back for them." Wren walked over to the boxes. She opened the first one. Inside were photo albums, high school yearbooks, letters from basic training, things she had not thought about in years. She picked up one of the photo albums and flipped through it. There were pictures of her as a teenager, smiling and carefree. Pictures of her in uniform, young and determined. Pictures of her with Sarah, arms around each other, both of them laughing. "I forgot what I looked like when I smiled," Wren said quietly. Sarah put a hand on her shoulder. "You'll smile again. It just takes time." Over the next few weeks, Wren slowly went through the boxes. Each one contained pieces of her past, medals and ribbons from her early service, letters from friends she had lost touch with, a journal she had kept during her first deployment. Reading her own words from years ago felt strange, like looking at a person she no longer recognized, but somehow still remembered. One entry, dated during her SEAL training, stood out. "If I fail, it won't be because I wasn't strong enough. It will be because I gave up. And I'm not giving up. Not ever." Wren closed the journal. She had kept that promise. Even when everything else had fallen apart, she had not given up. Her first therapy session with Dr. Torvin was difficult. Wren sat in the office, a small room, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and struggled to find words. Dr. Torvin did not push. She simply sat across from Wren and waited. Finally, Wren spoke. "I don't know where to start." "Start wherever feels right," Dr. Torvin said. Wren talked about Syria, about the explosion, about waking up alone and not knowing who she was anymore. She talked about the months spent trying to prove her identity, the doors that closed in her face, the people who looked at her with suspicion or pity. She talked about the moment she gave up trying, the moment she decided it was easier to be no one. Dr. Torvin listened without interrupting. When Wren finally fell silent, the therapist spoke gently. "You survived something that should have killed you. Not just the explosion, but everything that came after. That takes incredible strength." "It doesn't feel like strength," Wren said. "It feels like I just kept breathing because I didn't know how to stop. That's still strength. Sometimes survival is the bravest thing we can do." They met twice a week after that. Slowly, session by session, Wren began to unpack the years of trauma she had carried. She talked about the guilt she felt for surviving when others had not. She talked about the anger at a system that had abandoned her. She talked about the fear that she would never be whole again. Dr. Torvin helped her reframe those feelings. The guilt was natural, but it did not mean she had done anything wrong. The anger was justified, but it did not have to consume her. The fear was real, but it did not define her future. It's okay to not be okay, Dr. Torvin said during one session. Healing is not about erasing what happened. It's about learning to live with it. Wren nodded. She was beginning to understand. Judge Oakridge stayed in touch. He called every few days to check in, to see how Wren was doing, to offer support. He also became an advocate for other veterans in similar situations. He started a program in his courtroom requiring public defenders to flag any defendant with military service for additional review. He partnered with local VA offices to create a fast-track system for veterans facing charges related to homelessness or mental health crises. One afternoon, he invited Wren to his office. It was a modest space, lined with law books and framed photographs. One photograph caught Wren's eye. It showed a younger Emmett Oakridge in Marine Corps uniform, standing with a group of men in the desert. She recognized the landscape. Fallujah. "That's us," the judge said, noticing her gaze. "2nd Battalion, taken 2 days before the ambush." Wren stepped closer. She pointed to one of the men in the photograph. "That's Pruitt," the judge nodded. "And that's Lieutenant Hayes, Corporal Dennison, Private First Class Martinez. All of us made it out because of you and your team." Wren looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she turned to the judge. "Why did you do this? Why did you push so hard for me?" The judge leaned back in his chair. "Because I owed you, and because it was the right thing to do, but also because I couldn't stand the thought of you disappearing again. You deserve better. You still do." He paused, then continued. "After the ceremony, after I saw you standing there holding that flag, I went home and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the other veterans out there who are slipping through the cracks, people who served with honor and are now living in their cars or under bridges, people who are one bad day away from ending up in my courtroom like you did. What are you going to do about it?" Wren asked. "Whatever I can. I've already started working with the local VA. We're setting up a diversion program. Instead of jail time for minor offenses, veterans get connected with housing, medical care, and support services. It's not perfect, but it's a start." Wren nodded. "That's good. I want you to be part of it," the judge said. "When you're ready. You have a unique perspective. You know what these people are going through because you lived it. Your voice could make a real difference." Wren considered this. "I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I understand. But the offer stands. Whenever you're ready." 3 months after the ceremony, Wren moved into her own apartment. It was small, just a 1-bedroom unit in a quiet complex near the base. But it was hers. Sarah helped her move in, bringing furniture from thrift stores and donations from people in the community who had heard Wren's story. The apartment filled up quickly. A bed, a couch, a table, a small television, dishes and cookware, towels and linens. It was not much, but it was more than Wren had owned in 4 years. Maya and Caleb helped too, carrying boxes and arguing about where things should go. Caleb insisted that the flag should go on the main wall where everyone could see it. Maya thought it should be somewhere more private, more respectful. Wren compromised. She hung her framed certificate beside the window in the living room and placed the folded flag on the shelf below it. When everything was finally in place, Sarah stood in the middle of the living room and smiled. "It looks like home." Wren looked around. "Yeah, it does." That night, after Sarah and the kids left, Wren sat alone in her apartment. The silence was both comforting and unsettling. She was not used to having her own space, her own door that locked from the inside, her own bed that was always there. She walked from room to room, touching the walls, the furniture, the dishes in the cabinet. She opened the refrigerator and stared at the food Sarah had stocked for her. Milk, eggs, bread, cheese, simple things, normal things. She made herself a sandwich and sat at the table. As she ate, she thought about all the nights she had gone to bed hungry, all the times she had scrounged for food in dumpsters or begged for spare change. Those days felt both distant and immediate, like a dream she could not quite shake. But she was here now. She had survived. And tomorrow she would wake up in her own bed, in her own apartment, and take another step forward. Work came next. Captain Vess helped her find a position at the base, working with the reintegration program. It was not a combat role. It was not even a traditional military role, but it was meaningful. Wren's job was to meet with veterans who were struggling, who were lost, who did not know how to navigate the system. She listened to their stories. She shared her own when it felt right. She helped them find resources, connect with advocates, and believe that they were not alone. It was hard work. Some days, Ren came home exhausted, emotionally drained from hearing stories that mirrored her own. She met veterans who had lost everything. Veterans with PTSD so severe they could not leave their homes. Veterans who had been dishonorably discharged for mental health issues and were now fighting to get their benefits reinstated. Veterans who had families who no longer recognized them, who had children who were afraid of them, who had spouses who had given up on them. But other days, she saw progress. She saw people who had been living in their cars move into stable housing. She saw veterans reconnect with their families. She saw hope return to eyes that had been empty for too long. And those days made everything worthwhile. One afternoon, a young woman came into Ren's office. She was in her late 20s, with short hair and a guarded expression. She wore a faded army jacket and jeans with holes in the knees. She sat down across from Ren and did not speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "I heard about you, about what happened. I just wanted to meet you." Ren nodded. "What's your name?" "Corporal Tessa Gray. I served in Afghanistan. Got out 2 years ago. Been on the streets ever since." Ren leaned forward slightly. "What brings you here today?" Tessa looked down at her hands. "I don't know. I guess I just wanted to see if it was real. If someone like you could come back from where I am." "It's real," Ren said, "and you can come back too." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I believe that." "You don't have to believe it yet. You just have to take the first step, and I'll be here to help you take the next one." They talked for over an hour. Tessa told Ren about her deployment, about the IED that killed 2 of her squad members, about the nightmares that kept her awake, about the VA appointments she missed because she did not have reliable transportation, about the family that stopped calling because they did not know how to help her. Ren listened. She did not offer empty platitudes. She did not tell Tessa everything would be okay. Instead, she said, "I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like no one cares, but you're here now. That matters." By the end of the conversation, Tessa had agreed to start the process: housing, medical care, therapy. It would take time, but it was a beginning. As Tessa left, she turned back at the door. "Thank you, Commander." Ren shook her head. "Just Ren." "And you're welcome." Over the following months, Ren saw Tessa regularly. She helped her navigate the bureaucracy, fill out forms, attend appointments. She celebrated when Tessa moved into a small studio apartment. She listened when Tessa had setbacks, when the nightmares got worse, when the temptation to give up became overwhelming. Slowly, Tessa began to rebuild her life. She got a part-time job at a warehouse. She reconnected with her younger brother. She started attending group therapy sessions for veterans. And through it all, Ren was there, not as a therapist or a counselor, but as someone who understood. Judge Oakridge's diversion program officially launched 6 months after Ren moved into her apartment. The ceremony was small, held at the courthouse with local officials, VA representatives, and a handful of veterans who had already benefited from the program. Ren was invited to speak. She stood at the podium, looking out at the small crowd. Public speaking had never been her strength. She preferred action to words. But she had a story to tell, and people needed to hear it. 6 months ago, I stood in this courthouse in chains, she began. I was accused of stealing a jacket to stay warm. I had no ID, no home, no proof of who I was. The system saw me as a problem to be processed and forgotten. She paused. But I wasn't a problem. I was a person, a veteran, someone who had served this country and fallen through the cracks. And I'm not the only one. There are thousands of veterans out there right now who are struggling, who are homeless, who are one bad day away from ending up where I was. She looked at Judge Oakridge. This program is a step in the right direction. It's not perfect. It won't save everyone, but it will save some. And that matters. The crowd applauded. Ren stepped down from the podium, and Judge Oakridge shook her hand. "You did good, Commander." After the ceremony, several veterans approached Ren. They thanked her for speaking. They told her their own stories. One man, a Vietnam veteran in his 70s, gripped her hand tightly. "I've been waiting 50 years for someone to say what you just said. Thank you." Ren nodded, unable to find words. 6 months after the ceremony, Ren returned to the naval base for another event. This time, it was not for her. It was for the unveiling of a new memorial dedicated to service members who had been lost but later found, who had slipped through the cracks but fought their way back. Wren's name was on the memorial, along with dozens of others. The names were engraved in black granite, each one representing a life that had been overlooked, a sacrifice that had been forgotten, a person who had been invisible but was now seen. The ceremony was smaller than the first, more intimate. Judge Oakridge was there, Captain Vess, Pruitt and his family, Sarah and her kids, Dr. Quillen, Dr. Torvin, and a handful of veterans Wren had worked with, including Tessa Gray, who now had a place to live and a job lined up. Emma, Pruitt's daughter, stood beside her father. She had asked to meet Wren several times, and today she finally got her chance. When Wren approached, Emma stepped forward and hugged her without hesitation. "Thank you for saving my dad," Emma said, her voice muffled against Wren's shoulder. "You're welcome." When Emma stepped back, Pruitt put a hand on Wren's shoulder. "You've done more than save lives, Commander. You've given people hope. That's worth more than any medal." Wren looked at him. "I'm just doing what I can. That's all any of us can do." When it was Wren's turn to speak at the memorial unveiling, she stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at the small crowd. For a moment, she was back in that courtroom, shackled and silent, staring at the floor while people whispered about her. But that moment was gone. This was different. "I'm not good at speeches," Wren began. "I never have been. But I want to say something today. For a long time, I believed I didn't exist, that the person I used to be was gone, and the person I had become didn't matter. I was wrong." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We all matter. Every single one of us. Whether we're wearing a uniform or sleeping on the streets, whether people see us or not, we matter. And we deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be helped." She looked at Tessa. "It's not easy to ask for help. I know that. I spent 4 years refusing to believe I needed it. But asking for help is not weakness. It's courage. And if you're out there right now, struggling, invisible, thinking no one cares, I want you to know something. I care. We all care. And we're not giving up on you." The crowd was silent. Then slowly they began to clap. It was not the thunderous applause of the first ceremony. It was quieter, more personal, but it meant just as much. After the ceremony, Wren stood by the memorial, running her fingers over the engraved names. She thought about each person represented. There. Each story, each struggle, each triumph. Pruitt approached with Emma. The girl looked at Wren with wide eyes, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a handmade card. "I made this for you," Emma said shyly. Wren opened the card. Inside was a drawing of a woman in military uniform, standing tall and strong. Below it, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being a hero." Wren felt her throat tighten. "This is beautiful. Thank you." Emma smiled. "My dad says you're the bravest person he's ever met." Wren looked at Pruitt, who nodded. "She's not wrong." As the sun set over the base, Wren stood alone by the memorial. The crowd had dispersed, leaving her in the quiet. She looked at her name, etched into the stone alongside the others. She thought about the woman who had entered that courtroom 8 months ago, shackled and silent, believing she was nothing. That woman was gone. Not because she had been fixed or saved, but because she had chosen to keep fighting, to keep believing, to keep moving forward. She thought about the years she had spent on the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. Those years were part of her now, woven into the fabric of who she was. They had not broken her. They had made her stronger, and now she could use that strength to help others. Wren turned away from the memorial and walked toward the parking lot, where Sarah was waiting. Her sister smiled when she saw her. "Ready to go home?" Wren smiled back. "Yeah, I'm ready." They drove through the evening, the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Wren rested her head against the window, watching the world pass by. For the first time in 4 years, she allowed herself to think about the future, not just tomorrow or next week, but months and years ahead. She thought about the veterans she would help, the people she would meet, the life she would rebuild, one day at a time. She thought about Emma playing soccer and dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. She thought about Tessa taking her first steps toward a new life. She thought about Judge Oakridge fighting to make the system better. She thought about Pruitt, who had never given up on finding her. and she thought about Sarah, who had opened her home and her heart without hesitation. Wren closed her eyes. She was not whole yet. She might never be. But she was here. She was alive. And for now, that was enough. 1 year after the courtroom incident, Wren received an invitation in the mail. It was from the Department of the Navy, requesting her presence at a ceremony in Washington. The letter was formal, but the meaning was clear. They wanted to honor her properly, publicly, with full military honors. Wren showed the letter to Sarah. "I don't know if I want to do this." Sarah read the letter, then looked at her sister. "Why not?" "Because it feels like they're trying to make up for what they did. Like a ceremony can erase 4 years of being invisible." Sarah set the letter down. Maybe they are trying to make up for it, and maybe they can't erase what happened. But maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about you, about honoring what you survived and what you accomplished. Wren was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Will you come with me?" Of course. The ceremony in Washington was grand, far grander than anything Wren had expected. It was held at the Pentagon, in a room filled with high-ranking officers, government officials, and members of the press. Wren wore her dress uniform, which had been specially tailored to fit her properly. Sarah sat in the front row, along with Pruitt and Emma, Judge Oakridge, Captain Vess, Dr. Quillen, and Dr. Torvin. The Secretary of the Navy spoke first. He talked about sacrifice and service, about the men and women who gave everything for their country, about the failures of the system and the commitment to do better. Then he called Wren forward. "Lieutenant Commander Wren Ashbridge Holstad," he said, his voice echoing through the room, "for valor above and beyond the call of duty, for selfless service in the face of overwhelming odds, for refusing to leave a fallen comrade behind. It is my honor to present you with the Navy Cross." The room erupted in applause. Wren stood at attention as the medal was pinned to her uniform. She stared straight ahead, her face impassive, but inside she felt something shift. Not pride, exactly, not vindication, but closure. A sense that this chapter of her life was finally, truly over. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Wren shook hands with people she did not know. She smiled for photographs. She answered questions from reporters. And through it all, she felt oddly detached, as if she were watching someone else go through the motions. Finally, she found a quiet corner and sat down. Pruitt found her a few minutes later. He sat beside her, not saying anything at first. Then he spoke. "You okay?" Wren nodded. "Just tired." "You've earned the right to be tired." They sat in companionable silence. Then Wren said, "Do you ever feel like you're living 2 lives? Like there's the person you were before and the person you are now, and they don't quite fit together?" Pruitt nodded. "All the time. But I think that's okay. We're not supposed to be the same people we were. We've been through too much for that. So what do? We keep moving forward. We take care of the people who need us. And we try to make peace with the parts of ourselves that don't fit together." Wren looked at him. "When did you get so wise?" Pruitt smiled. "Around the same time. You stopped being invisible." 2 years after the courtroom incident, Wren's life had taken on a rhythm. She worked at the base 4 days a week, helping veterans navigate the system. She attended therapy every other week, still processing the trauma of her past. She spent time with Sarah and the kids, learning to be part of a family again. She stayed in touch with Pruitt, Judge Oakridge, and the others who had helped her. She also started volunteering at a local homeless shelter. She did not tell them about her past at first. She just showed up, served food, cleaned dishes, and talked to people who reminded her of who she had been. Eventually, word got out. Someone recognized her from a news article. The shelter director asked if she would be willing to speak to the residents. Wren agreed. She stood in front of a room full of people who were tired, hungry, and hopeless. She looked at their faces and saw herself. "I know what it's like to have nothing," she began, "to be invisible, to feel like the world has given up on you. I lived on the streets for 4 years. I slept in parking garages and ate out of dumpsters. I was arrested and brought into court in chains for stealing a jacket." She paused. "But I'm here now, and if I can come back from that, so can you. It's not easy, it's not fast, but it's possible. You just have to take the first step, and then the next one, and then the one after that." When she finished, the room was silent. Then an older man in the back raised his hand. "What was your first step?" Wren thought about it. Accepting help. I spent so long trying to do everything alone that I forgot how to let people in. But when I finally did, things started to change. The man nodded slowly. Thank you. After her talk, several people approached Ren. They asked for advice. They shared their stories. One woman, middle-aged with gray streaks in her hair, gripped Ren's hand tightly. I lost everything 2 years ago. My job, my house, my family. I didn't think I'd ever come back from it. But hearing you tonight, I think maybe I can. You can, Ren said. It won't be easy, but you can. 3 years after the courtroom incident, Ren was invited to speak at a national conference on veteran homelessness. The conference was held in Denver, and Ren flew there with Sarah. It was the first time Ren had been on a plane since Syria, and the experience was overwhelming. The crowds, the noise, the confined space. But Sarah stayed by her side, and Ren made it through. The conference was attended by hundreds of people, VA officials, social workers, advocates, other veterans. Ren's speech was scheduled for the second day. She stood backstage, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Sarah gave her a quick hug. You've got this. Ren walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, and she could barely see the audience, but she could feel them. Hundreds of people, waiting to hear what she had to say. My name is Ren Hallstad, she began. 3 years ago, I was homeless. I was arrested for stealing a jacket. I stood in a courtroom in chains while people whispered about me, judged me, and dismissed me. No one knew who I was. No one cared. She paused. But I was a Navy SEAL. I had served multiple combat deployments. I had saved lives. I had sacrificed everything for my country. And the system failed me. The room was silent. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I'm not unique. There are thousands of veterans out there right now who are going through what I went through, who are invisible, who are falling through the cracks, and we have a responsibility to do better. She spoke for 20 minutes. She talked about the barriers veterans faced, the bureaucracy, the stigma, the lack of coordination between agencies. She talked about what had helped her, the people who refused to give up on her, the programs that connected her with resources, the therapy that helped her process her trauma. And she talked about hope, because without hope, none of it mattered. When she finished, the audience stood and applauded. Several people were crying. After her speech, Ren was mobbed by attendees. They wanted to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her their own stories. A VA official approached and asked if she would be willing to consult on a new initiative to improve veteran services. Ren said yes. That night, back at the hotel, Sarah ordered room service and they ate together in comfortable silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? Ren looked at her sister. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. 4 years after the courtroom incident, Ren was contacted by a documentary filmmaker. The filmmaker had read about Ren's story and wanted to make a film about veteran homelessness, using Ren's experience as the centerpiece. Ren was hesitant. She did not want to relive her trauma for the camera, but the filmmaker assured her that the goal was not to exploit her story, but to educate people and advocate for change. Ren agreed, with one condition. The film had to include other veterans, other stories. She did not want it to be just about her. The filming took 6 months. Ren was interviewed multiple times. She revisited the parking garage where she had been arrested. She walked through the courthouse where her life had changed. She sat with Judge Oakridge, Pruitt, Sarah, and others, talking about what had happened and what had changed. The film also featured interviews with other veterans. Tessa Gray talked about her journey from homelessness to stability. A Vietnam veteran talked about 50 years of struggling with PTSD. A younger veteran talked about the challenges of transitioning back to civilian life. When the film premiered, it was shown at film festivals across the country. It won awards. It was picked up by a major streaming service. And most importantly, it started conversations. People who had never thought about veteran homelessness began to pay attention. Politicians began to propose new legislation. VA offices began to implement new programs. Ren did not watch the film. She could not. It was too painful to see herself on screen, to relive those years. But she was glad it existed, glad that it was making a difference. 5 years after the courtroom incident, Ren stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, getting ready for another ceremony. This one was different. It was not about her. It was about the opening of a new veteran resource center, funded by donations and government grants, designed to provide comprehensive services to homeless and at-risk veterans. The center would offer housing assistance, job training, medical care, mental health services, and legal advocacy, all under one roof, all free of charge. Wren had been heavily involved in the planning. She had consulted on the design. She had helped recruit staff. She had advocated for funding. And now she would be speaking at the opening. Sarah knocked on the door. "Ready?" Wren adjusted her collar. "Yeah, let's go." The resource center was located in a renovated warehouse near the base. It was bright and welcoming, with large windows and comfortable furniture. The walls were decorated with photographs of veterans, each one telling a story of resilience and recovery. One of those photographs was of Wren standing beside the memorial at the naval base, her hand resting on the engraved stone. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, veterans, advocates, government officials, media. Judge Oakridge was there, Captain Vess, Pruitt and Emma, Tessa Gray, Dr. Quillen, Dr. Torvin, and dozens of others who had been part of Wren's journey. When it was Wren's turn to speak, she walked to the podium. She looked out at the crowd. She saw faces she knew, faces she had helped, faces that had helped her, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Gratitude. 5 years ago, I was standing in a courtroom in chains, she began. I was homeless. I was invisible. I was convinced that I didn't matter, but I was wrong. I did matter, and so does every veteran who walks through these doors. She gestured to the building behind her. This center represents more than just services. It represents hope. It represents the belief that no veteran should ever be left behind, that no matter how far someone has fallen, they can come back, and we will be here to help them. The crowd applauded. Wren stepped down from the podium. As she walked through the center, veterans approached her. They shook her hand. They thanked her. One man, tears in his eyes, said, "You saved my life. I was about to give up. But then I heard your story, and I realized I could keep going." Wren did not know what to say, so she just nodded and squeezed his hand. That evening, Wren sat on her balcony, watching the sun set. Sarah had gone home with the kids. Pruitt and Emma had left for the airport. The day had been long and emotional, but Wren felt at peace. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Judge Oakridge. "Congratulations, Commander. You've done something truly remarkable." Wren smiled and typed back. "We all did this together." She set the phone down and closed her eyes. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago. Broken, invisible, lost. And she thought about the woman she was now. Still scarred, still healing. But no, longer invisible. She had survived. She had rebuilt. And she had found a purpose. To help others. To make sure that no veteran ever had to go through what she had gone through. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Wren opened her eyes. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. The air was cool and calm, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Wren felt truly at peace. She stood and walked inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new veterans to help, new stories to hear, new battles to fight. But tonight, she would rest, because she had earned it, and she was finally home. If someone you know has served in silence, struggled in shadows, or fought battles that no one saw, let them know they matter. Share their story with the world. Honor their courage. Recognize their sacrifice. And if this story reminded you that every person has value, that every life can be rebuilt, that hope is never truly lost, please consider subscribing. These stories need to be told. These voices need to be heard. Together, we can make sure no one is left invisible. Together, we can bring every lost soul home.